visitor, and I'm really excited. This time, Kevin Hagan is back for the second time to talk to us. He currently serves as the interim CEO of the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance, an organization with a vision to catalyze a global community of buyers and to drive adoption of clean energy solutions to achieve a 90% decarbonized grid by 2030. An optimist, in other words. CEBA and the affiliated Clean Energy Buyers Institute work to empower over 300 members to accelerate action and break down barriers to clean energy adoption. Also of interest, prior to this, he served as vice president for ESG issues at Iron Mountain, a Fortune 500 corporation operating in over 60 countries, where he set their global sustainability business strategy and deployed solutions across a wide range of ESG issues. So all of these things are things we're very excited to talk to you about today, and we'll let you go first.
Hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So where to start? What I thought we'd do maybe is just give a little context of what I'm thinking, and in order to hopefully have a great dialogue and answer questions and engage with you guys, both online and here in the room. What I thought I'd do is sort of just set up a little bit of a context, maybe a thesis of an idea, and that maybe grounds for provocation of how you maybe challenge it or a little bit, or let's kick the tires and see if we think it could possibly hold water. So I am a fundamental optimist, and which is, I think the right attitude to take into the issues around environmental, social challenges that we face today as society as a world. Otherwise, you kind of run to denial or despair, to completely natural reactions in the face of all the things we challenge ourselves with today in the world. On the other hand, denial and despair don't get us very far. And so I think you have to reach to hope. And hope sends the signal of optimism. And I think if I look around, and while there's plenty of evidence that the challenge is big, there's also some hope. And I think one of the places that I see a great deal of hope is in the notion of sustainable business. The idea that business can be part of the solution. Let's face it, if business has been part of the problem, and that's a fair contention, then, well, by extension, you could actually be part of the solution too, couldn't we? And really, what if we could imagine that business could be more successful if it was part of the solution instead of being part of the problem? I think that fundamental notion gives us this idea that, well, if business were able to incorporate notions of environmental and social performance in their overall business performance, what if that was part of the business metrics that we look at? Then we could identify opportunities to get different outcomes. I think that so far, try harder isn't doing it. And we have to think about differently the way we do things. So this is sort of a paraphrase of the Einstein notion, right? So the thinking that we're not going to solve problems with the thinking that caused them. So we have to fundamentally change something. And my thought is that in my experience so far in corporate environments has been that business has the mechanisms to do this. We just have to give it the right inputs. And it can be incredibly powerful. In fact, I would even offer that my thesis is that business, corporate environments, business is the only human institution with the scale, the speed, and the resources to make a big enough difference fast enough to matter. So that's the root of my optimism. My thinking around this is that I kind of think in three levels on this. First, in the center of the bullseye, if you will, is what do I do? What can I do? And I think that, as a consumer, as an employee, like to work, recycle, do my part, so I can do something as me. That's close, and I can have the most control over it. But arguably for most of us, that's sort of a small impact. Right? This is relatively, we're going to count on the cumulative, lots of us doing that to make a bigger difference. The next circle out in my mind is really about who we are as business leaders in business or substitute large organization. You're a government employee, you're an NGO, but who am I as a business person, as a business decision maker? From relatively starting jobs in organizations, all the way through very senior jobs, we're making business decisions all the time. And those business decisions have the leverage of the entire organization behind them. So we may think as individuals that $1 million decision is a big deal. I see $1 million decisions in business like every day. And people with relatively not that much seniority are making $1 million decisions all the time in a business context, depending on the business. And so, and scale from there. So, if you think, so therefore, we have a power to incorporate environmental and social performance as part of our business thinking and make better business decisions as a result. And finally, in the biggest circle is how are we as, in a bigger influence? How do we use the power of our brand or our organizational footprint to influence even more impact, bring others along, collaborate with NGO community, with the academic community, with government, and with other business in order to bring along an even bigger, more powerful change. So that's my thinking about how I kind of construct decision-making in this bullseye chart. And I think it has a help to be able to think about how to construct our approach to our own efforts and how we can influence organizations. So that's my provocation for the moment. Maybe I'll take a step back and give you just a sense of how I got to this idea. I am an engineer by background. I'm trying to get better. But I was a double electrical and mechanical engineer in undergraduate, and that makes me essentially useless in 2 domains. So that I was, then I immediately went into more marketing management type roles. And I worked in the aerospace industry for 10 or 12 years and kind of grew up through international business and through the elements around customer engagement on engineering, custom engineering solutions. So it's kind of a blend of internal and external, and it was a blend of engineering and marketing / commerce. And it was a very interesting place to sort of grow up professionally, because I perhaps learned what eventually became what I think was not only just the business savvy pieces of all that, but one of the most powerful tools that I personally adopted, which was the ability to be organizationally multilingual. Meaning that I could adapt the cultures of the different parts of the organization. I could speak finance with finance folks. I could be an engineer with engineering folks. I could be an operations guru with the operations folks. And being able to speak all those languages, recognize that there are those little mini cultures and all those different languages in the organization gave me a huge power to be able to be somewhat of the cross silo linkage between groups and individuals. And that gave me a really neat opportunity to pull people together and get more done by breaking down silos and putting groups together and being inclusive. It gave us a really neat opportunity to make things happen. I ended up leaving the aerospace industry to join the solar industry. Probably the only person you'll know that was in the aerospace industry in New York and moved to Seattle to be in the solar business. It's not obvious, but in fact, we were a little startup. We were literally a 2-bay garage operation when I joined. We made power electronics, that is the intel inside of solar, wind, and other renewable energy systems, the machinery that changes DC current to AC current and allows, therefore, DC sources like solar to end up running the stuff you need in your house, which is AC powered stuff. And ultimately, we were the first business in North America to develop an inverter that allowed solar systems, solar electricity, to be connected to the grid. That turned out to be important. And in fact, is pretty much the fundamental element of all of our renewable energy today. It was a great experience. Again, like the aerospace, military aerospace complex was, the solar industry was an incredibly purpose-driven business, very purpose-driven organization, very purpose-driven. Unfortunately, the next chapter I learned was how to go public. And I met the entire world of venture capital and going public. And we had a successful IPO, by conventional sense, an incredibly dissatisfying experience on this personal level. And in fact, ultimately, business wasn't that successful after IPO and after I left. Wait, no. No, there's correlation, causation. And, so the lesson I learned out of that was that, and I say it in a flippant way, is the more we focused on the dollars, the less the business made sense. And in fact, it was certainly true in that instance. And it gave me cause for pause. And I ended up going back to grad school and getting one of the first MBAs in sustainable business. And it's from there and meeting some amazing people who were doing wonderful work in this whole space of creating the foundation for enabling and empowering business to start thinking differently. And from Bill McDonough and the cradle to cradle world to Gifford Pinchot and the efforts around entrepreneurship and green chemistry, it was all kind of coming together all at the same time, and it was pretty exciting. I used that background to become the first chief sustainability officer, but we didn't use that language at the time, at REI, the outdoor co-op, which was a wonderful chapter. Learned a ton there. And then segued into a similar role leading the sustainable business or environmental social governance effort at Iron Mountain, which was a much bigger organization than no one's ever heard of it. But it was a multinational multinational corporation focused on information management, information technology, and storage. And that business became one of the fastest growing data center businesses. So running large scale data center operations around the world. All right, so what I learned, besides my little thing, a lot about how being able to lead change in organizations and lead sustainable business thinking. Essentially, how we can add sustainable business thinking, a construct, a literature, thinking about that way of doing business to virtually any job in the company and become more successful, both in terms of the individual's success as an individual and their pursuits, but also in terms of being able to create more value for the business and ultimately for the business to create more value as it solves problems instead of causing them. All right, that's enough soliloquy. Let's maybe I'll see if anybody's got questions so far. And then if not, I'll even try to be more provocative from there. So
I'm going to preempt things just to, there's one little piece I would like you to fill in very much. And one thing I want to remind everybody of, when you ask a question, make sure you project for the people out in Zoom land. I just made that word up, are not going to hear you very well. Okay, so make sure that, because it's really important for them to know what he's responding to. That was a great description of what you've done in your career. Part of what I'm curious about always is why? What made you want to move to sustainability as the area of business that you wanted to devote your time and energy to?
That's a great, it's great. The reflection I had at the time after my small company went public, or our small company went public, was that something broke. And there was happiness and success, and then not. And so after some reflection and some time in the mountains to try to come to that conclusion, I decided that this notion of sustainable business put purpose into what we do. And, someone at that time told me that an awful lot of people spend their entire career trying to be successful and their retirement trying to be relevant. And I don't think that works. I don't want to wait, or I didn't want to wait. I wanted to make a difference in my day job. And I think that was the secret to realizing that you can't just try harder or bike to work. You got to do something different. And the information, the discipline of sustainable business thinking was the secret sauce to really changing the way I did things.
I will underscore for all of you the importance of that time in the mountains, the transition. So make sure you build that into your lives. Okay, open for questions now. Especially hard ones. Yes.
Given your current background in data centers, what are your thoughts on Microsoft's Project Native, and how do you think that's very sustainable?
Microsoft's Project Native. Give us a little bit of background on Project Native, because maybe not everybody knows.
It's in the summary.
Yeah.
For the plans.
Yeah. So this was basically a small data center in a can that they submerged. Have I said enough? So I applaud many friends of Microsoft, work with them a lot and worked with them in the data center space as well as other spaces. It is awesome that an organization like Microsoft has the degree of freedom and to be able to take risk and try stuff. And B, I think it's awesome that an organization's scale and size of Microsoft recognizes what challenges they should be trying stuff are about. So 2 wins, and they recognize that higher performance data centers in terms of environmental, social, and economic performance are necessary, and that they've got room to try different things. And they have tried a lot of different things, from hydrogen-powered fuel cell power supplies to submerging a data center. They've done a lot of sort of, leading edge stuff that most companies don't have the risk appetite or the funding to take on. So I applaud that. I also applaud their public relations team for getting the maximum credit for doing it, which is awesome. Hi.
I was wondering a little bit on the Microsoft tangent. I've heard a lot about the NC data centers and that as a case study for the balance between clean energy and local environmental damage and local environmental politics in a small town. So for the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance, I maybe have not done my homework as much as I should, but to what extent does that organization balance renewable energy as a pro for climate change versus the environmental damage that's kind of a separate issue from the climate change?
I love this question. Thank you. As a board member of Clean Energy Buyers Alliance and as a member, Iron Mountain was vocal in supporting an effort which emerged to be called an entire initiative called Beyond the Megawatt, which is an effort by the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance to instill the rest of the package, the rest of environmental and social justice into the conversation around renewables. Let's face it, if we just build renewable resources with the same mentality and the same business behavior that oil companies have been building out and coal mines have been building out for 100 and something years, we're going to get the same set of problems that we had then, right? And whether it's, and I can say you're schooling me up, again, this was bait, right? So, but recently there's been an entire, hash around the notion that solar panels being made in China, in some places, were being made with exploited labor. Shame on us. That is ridiculous. We had that problem in the 90s in the textile industry. How on earth could we end up walking into that same problem face first? Utter stupidity. Right? That is just a incredible industrial blind spot that we deserve to wear, on our neck, because we didn't learn the lesson. For crying out loud, at REI, we were working on sustainable supply chains and textiles and fair labor industry issues and exploited labor, literally for 30 years. How can we do that? And how can we not apply that learning in the solar industry? And I tell you, really easy. It happened really easily because we were applying the exact same business process, the exact same business thinking, masquerading ourselves as green tech, and patting ourselves on the back that we were all so green, when in fact we were executing exactly the same playbook that we always had. That's terrible. Sustainability is not just what you do, it's how you do it. And I think that we need to work through the entire industry, whether it's wind developers building wind farms in rural communities, or whether it's how we manufacture the components, or how we think about recycling the components or building for recyclability of the components of renewable energy systems. The mere fact that we're making green electrons isn't enough. Got to do it all. So I can take the rest of the time on this one. Thank you for serving me up a pet project issue.
Yeah, I have kind of a follow-up question, if that's okay. So kind of what I hear that you're saying is we do need the whole package before we get too far ahead of ourselves, but we are on kind of a strict timeline. So from your perspective, would you rather us buy our time and build out solar, build out hydro, whatever else we need, and kind of save ourselves on the climate change aspect, and then go back and try and fix our local environmental issues that come from the rare earth minerals mining, like, because
Exploited communities.
it's very difficult to do it all at once. And it feels like if we try to do it perfectly, we might not save ourselves the time.
So you set me up for my second pet peeve. You should be plans. I admit it. So I'm gonna unpack a little bit of what you didn't say behind the question, because I think the question points at a mental model, a construct that I think we need to challenge. And the underlying assumption here is that we have to figure out some kind of balance, because one contradicts the other, right? Doing the right thing or doing the better environmental performance has inherently negative consequences on the other side that we have to try to balance. And the whole art of sustainability would be to figure out that balance. I want us to all just embrace for a moment the idea that that is a broken mentality. That's a broken mindset. It's incorrect. I think that in fact that when we get it right, when we are more innovative, more collaborative, and better at the job, we're actually designing from the get-go solutions that get us more of both in the first place. And they're more efficient, they're more economical, and they're more environmentally and socially responsible because they were designed differently in the first place. And I think that that's a hard thing to get our heads around, because we're faced all the time with these trade-off conversations. And I'm not saying that we don't make trade-offs. Of course we do. As business decision makers, we're making trade-offs all the time and every day. So that's true. But my contention would be that when we find ourselves in that corner where we're being forced into trade-off decisions, we got to recognize that we probably blew it before we got here. We probably made some decision or something wrong that put us in this corner that we should have seen enough chess moves down the board to have fixed before we got here. And in fact, ultimately, what I found in business business decision making is what we often have to do is help business decision makers who find themselves in those corners do something differently. Often it's break the rules so we can knock down one of the walls and now you're not in the corner anymore. And a lot of that is they're constrained in decision-making by their organization chart. And so we got to give them permission to talk to a different division or a different organization. Let me give you some examples. So, for example, at REI, we had the problem of waste, trying to get to zero waste. And the cafeteria was one of our biggest problems because it was producing lots of organic waste that we had to throw away, and it ended up contaminating everything else. It was a big problem. So the solution set was, hey, let's compost. That was great. So great. In fact, when we got the right contracts in place, we could haul compost cheaper than we could haul waste. So it actually saved money to remove, to separate and have compost and waste, because compost we could actually dispose of for free or much more cost effectively than trash. Where was the rub? We constantly were contaminating the compost with all kinds of plastic utensils and stuff from the cafeteria. So we went to go say, well, let's just buy compostable stuff for the cafeteria so that we don't, so it all goes in the same bin and we're all done here, right? Well, that was interesting, except that the folks that ran the cafeteria weren't so excited about the incremental cost associated with the compostable utensils. Project stops. They can't make that decision. They're not going to spend any more money on that. So we're done. Except when we all got in the same room, we did the math and said, you know what? Even paying more, and this is dated, but anyway, even paying more for the compostable utensils, we still save money because on the whole, putting it all in recycling, in compost, saves money. But so let's do it. It makes sense. It makes money. Let's do this. Not so fast. Turns out that the waste hauling was paid for in one budget by one division and one organization, and the utensils were paid for in another division, another business, and another budget, and you couldn't move the money from one place to the people in the room didn't have the power to move the money from one to the other. So this person or this division was going to come out a big win. That division was going to come out a big loss. Obviously, as a total business, it made sense, but you couldn't get there from here. So we needed the sustainability team to ride into that, go up the chain of command until you found somebody where the dots met and give people permission to make the better business decision. All right, that's a bit of a long story, but it really points to, if we can be more collaborative, more innovative, more insightful, we can redesign business processes so that we get better total outcomes. Sometimes we have to change the metrics. Sometimes we have to change the goalpost. Sometimes we have to change the team, but we can in fact end up with better environmental, social, and economic solutions at the same time. Jury's out, huh?
Definitely optimistic. I think to me, there's a big difference between the business processes and the business decisions and like design thought and the reality of the technology we have today. Like I'm specifically thinking of the energy sector, like we don't really have anything that is a solution at this point. And I think maybe what you think is that by teaching people in a different way to think about the problems differently, that they're gonna eventually come up with something new that does check the boxes. Is that kind of?
Yeah, no, I think there's plenty of opportunity with what we got today. There doesn't have to be a downside to a solar installation. And it actually is more cost effective today in most places in the United States. In fact, currently battery plus solar is actually a cheaper dispatchable resource in most of California than a natural gas plant.
Right, but the batteries are made with rare earth minerals that are mostly mined and, you know.
Yeah, so the batteries we know today are made from lead, which would be poison. But 99% of battery lead is actually recycled today in all the cars that we have. So there's, I think, plenty of opportunities for current design, but also the evolution of design You just saw Chevy just removed the Bolt from production as of the end of the year because the battery technology doesn't conform to the direction they're headed for different battery chemistries, which are more recyclable, easier to manufacture, have less cobalt, have less rare earths. And so I think that's a snapshot in time problem. But here's the point, which I think you're making really well, which is if you don't think about that now, you're going to keep making chemistry that doesn't make sense, or you're going to keep relying on supply chains that can't keep up, or you're going to exploit communities when you build a wind farm because you behaved poorly in that community and didn't engage the community in its decisions about its own destiny. So I think there are tons of ways we can do it wrong. But if we put the emphasis on the right, if we set the bar correctly, that it's not okay to do it wrong, then I think that's the right answer. So I think you're posing the right question that creates the innovation that we need. Does it get harder than that?
I hope so, yes,
No, that's pretty hard.
Really having so much fun, we should make it harder. Does somebody have another question?
I'm curious, like, what do you think businesses should be doing that they aren't doing today for like sustainability?
Yeah, so what should businesses be doing that they aren't already doing? A lot. I think that it starts with better metrics. I'm a real fan of, maybe it's my behind or the background. I'm a real fan of metrics. I think if we can get better metrics on performance, including environmental and social performance, then we have a clue to identifying what we're trying to get done. For far too long, environmental and social performance of business has not been considered business statistics, business data. In fact, we used to call it non-financial reporting, which I just reject out of hand. On the other hand, if we're doing ESG reporting, environmental social governance reporting, based on less than rigorous process, we're not doing ourselves any favors either. If we decide that our carbon footprint is based on some average number of square feet by how much energy the average store uses, and therefore it must be around 1 million. No business leader is going to look at that and go, yeah, I believe that number. And yet for far too long, the ESG community has been okay with that kind of data gathering and that kind of estimate. So what's my fleet carbon emissions? Well, we have 437 vehicles. They get an average gas mileage of 20 miles a gallon. Stop. That's not a number. That's a guess. My fleet fuel purchase was 227,476 gallons of fuel. Now we have a conversation. And now I can convert that at 22 pounds of CO2 per gallon of gas, and I can tell you what my CO2 footprint looks like. And I have a connection to what I can do about it. So I think it starts with metrics. And I think that then the next thing is transparency. Even within the organization, being able to share that data in a way that's not just great storytelling and wonderful presentation, but is hard data that the CFO believes in. That's transparency. And then it's the action plans to deal with it. I think that when we're faced with those numbers, the fastest place we go is denial and despair. Right? Because you look overwhelming, it always looks like trade-offs, it's always going to be difficult. So I think grappling with that, and maybe one last thing I'd say about where business needs to be is business leadership has to have incredible courage, because we have to be courageous enough to be transparent about the warts and all actual where we are, because otherwise we can't change. And you have to own this challenge of the trade-offs. You can't just cop out and say, oh, well, let's do the right thing. I don't care what it costs. Because nobody else would. Why, right? Even if your business would, nobody else would. You're not meeting if you just cop out and buy it. Flip side is it's not okay to just accept that it's, as my grandfather used to say, you got to break some eggs if you want to make cake. No, we're not, it's not okay. We can't accept that we're going to have social and environmental negatives in order to be economically successful. So that's a hard place to be because it sounds like you're advocating lunacy. Oh no, we could, just be hopeful. But I think that courage to own the tension of expecting great outcomes. But you know what? Business leaders do that all the time. They just don't appreciate that that's what they're doing. We constantly want more sales and better margin. I mean, what CEO hasn't told their organization, I want both more sales and better margin? And yet every salesperson in the world goes, you can have either margin or sales, right? I can reduce the price and get more sales, or I can increase the price and get more margin. It's a trade-off, right? Well, no, right? We want both. And so I think that the challenges around sustainability, when you pitch them in business context and liken them to similar really hard challenges that business already handles, then business leaders start to go, oh, yeah, okay, I can get it. For example, I've been told it's really hard to get electricity or energy data for 800 facilities around the country. How am I going to get all that energy data every month for the entire fleet of facilities? No, you know what's hard? What's hard is to know the exact sales dollars for every cash register at every Walmart store in the entire country. I can't even count that high. Right? I have no idea how many cash registers Walmart has ringing at any given day, 24/7. But guess what? They know that number. And they know that number to the day, if not to the minute. Right? They know exactly what sales were today. That's hard. So if you can tell me what the cash register results were for 1 million cash registers every day, why can't you tell me the energy used for 800 facilities? It's just we haven't put the same focus on the same problem solving because we haven't treated it like a business problem. Wow, that was too long. Sorry.
I have a follow-up about the metrics. Are there any metrics that you think should change? Like we talked about measuring it in a different way, but that's still measuring carbon use. Are there anything that we're measuring one thing, but you think we should be measuring something else?
I think the biggest challenge, mostly environmental stuff, we can get to numbers, right? Water usage, water waste, energy use, carbon, waste numbers. I think that the line of sight to good environmental data is pretty solid. The line of sight to good human data, social impacts, we haven't even invented some of that stuff yet. And if I say I want to be a great community, I want my business to be, Iron Mountain had a goal, which I agree, it wrote, which said, we want to be positive influence in every community in which we do business. I think that's a great, lofty goal. How do you know? And so what is the metric for community impact? You pay your taxes, sure, and so does Exxon. So do we have that chemical factory down on Cancer Alley pays a lot of taxes. Is it good for the community? Well, they have higher jobs. There's a lot of people that work there. Right? How do you know what the total impact was? So I think we're just inventing that. Another example would be within the employment environment. I think we are adequate when pressed to count issues of diversity, at least invisible diversity issues. I'm not so sure we count what's more important, in my opinion, which is inclusion. And just because you had a bunch of people that look different doesn't necessarily mean they're all participating, where they all can be heard, where they're all actually contributing their thinking and their unique backgrounds and all they bring to the business decision process. And the argument for diversity is we have more points of view. Well, not if you can't hear them. So I think the earlier indicator is how inclusive is the organization. And I don't think we have good metrics for that. So I think that, so top of the line, the metrics that I think about a lot in terms of where we need to go is mostly on social dimensions, where I think we really need better social metrics in order to make better decisions.
Okay, question online, if you want to say.
Please do. Thanks, online team.
Yeah, so the people online are, they're thinking sort of big picture here, so here's one for you. And that is, in your opinion, Kevin, where do you see, what is the next big thing? What is the next frontier of sustainability in terms of business, based on your experience? Well, there's what people are talking about wanting to do or need to do, but what do you think will, what is the next thing that we really think?
I've given this some thought. So thanks for the opportunity. I think there's a lot of emphasis for most existing businesses to think about the how we do it aspect of business. So how I improve energy efficiency, improve engagement with employees, improve my social performance. So I think the how we do it piece is there. I don't think very many standing existing corporations have spent very much time yet thinking about what we do. In other words, the products we make and the things we offer are the solutions we provide for customers, and especially in the B2B environment. B2C folks have thought about this, but we're still thinking about it, right? So how many people here bought a Patagonia coat because it's more environmentally or socially responsible? Maybe some of us, but you know, you're gonna spend $400 on a coat. It better be waterproof. Right? And I don't believe that Patagonia products are better, faster, cheaper because of their sustainability initiatives. I don't think it's more waterproof or warmer. It's just cooler. And I believe in it and I love what they do and I'll buy it anyway, but it's really not warmer or drier. In the B2B environment, if the coat's not warmer or drier, it doesn't sell, period. I mean, nobody's buying it for brand cachet in the B2B environment. So I think that for the most part, where the next frontier in sustainable business thinking is how does our sustainability program create knowledge, capabilities, or opportunity for us to make better, faster, cheaper products because they are more sustainable. So how does sustainability actually improve product performance? And therefore, you know, what have we learned in our own sustainability journey that helps us solve sustainability challenges for our customer? And I think that's when we really turn into part of the solution instead of part of the problem. There are a few companies working on it, and they're getting there.
Anybody else? You had great questions online.
You guys did.
Emily.
Go ahead. We have a zinger. I should ruin a zinger.
Yeah.
There's two of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said that businesses have the right mechanisms, to meet the right inputs, but then you also said that you would like to rewrite the playbook for business. So I'm wondering, like, what aspects of capitalistic culture are you willing to keep, and what do you want to?
Wow, that's really. I got to think about that more. So, what aspects of sort of the capitalistic culture ought to stay, and what needs adjustment, if not outright amputation?
Nicely reformulated.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna be provocative. I don't think capitalistic mindset in and of itself is broken. I think the inputs that we have told ourselves and the outputs we have been satisfied with is broken. Our expectations need to improve. We need to say that it's not okay to break eggs to make cake. And we got to be able to say that, you know what, your product is not okay if you harmed people in the process. And you know, the way I used to say it at REI is when folks said, but you know, customers haven't asked us to change the formulation of the chemistry in shirts. We got to wait for customers to ask us that. I mean, wait a minute. Customers didn't ask you to put carcinogens in the fabric. Why do you have to wait for them to ask you to take them out? No, and we should be able to understand that problem better and anticipate that better. So I think the part that needs adjustment is the criteria for success. It's not merely economic success. It's going to be merely economically successful, sell drugs. Okay. You know, the cartels are fine, right? If that's the only thing you want to measure. But I think we've, you know, and the notion that performing at the legal limit is a broken idea, right? So you pollute at the legally allowable level. That's not a vision. Right? So I think that the idea of the machinery isn't necessarily broken. It's the expected outcomes that I think we need to adjust. At least that's my current thinking. I reserve the right to change that by tomorrow.
That comment is actually very similar to my question. So you said you led with saying that like businesses should be on the frontier of like environmental policy and like climate change prevention. And I find some difficulty with that because, you know, at least for the government, as ineffective as it may be, each citizen of a government has agency and can vote. But with a business, you know, some people have more money than others, so more people will have more agency to, you know, be into business than others. So how would you be able to check a business? Because, you know, the only metric that I see that business measure themselves by is profit.
Right.
What are the other metrics that they could?
What if you were more profitable because you were doing the right thing?
What if you were less profitable for doing the right thing?
Then you fail. And so I think that you're right. And I think that's actually status quo. I think they're actually being far less profitable than they could be because they're exporting or outsourcing the negative consequences. And I think it's counterintuitive. I totally own that it's counterintuitive to say that actually bringing back those externalities into the business actually can make you a better business. And I think that's the paradigm shift that we're arguing about. But what if it was? So my ultimate answer here is I will contend that it is in the enlightened self-interest of the business to actually incorporate those elements, because then they actually will find ways in which they are more profitable than the businesses who don't. That's the big if, big construct, but I think there's growing evidence to say it's true. And if you want to end on a high note from that perspective, what influence can business actually have and where can business be? So today I have this great opportunity to lead the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance, which now is a consortium of over 400 corporate entities, NGOs, and other NGO interests and agencies that is driving change in the clean energy space. Corporate voluntary purchases have to date totaled more than 60 gigawatts of renewable energy assets on the ground. More than 40% of all the renewable energy assets, that is new renewable energy assets currently in the US, are there because of corporate voluntary purchases. And those purchases, by and large, were not philanthropic efforts. They were the efforts of businesses who saw a more economical way to get energy through clean energy sources, sponsoring investing in buying clean energy resources versus conventional energy. That to me is an incredibly hopeful sign, because it says that we actually can shift big things, including the grid. And we can actually use corporate buying, forgive me, Marvel Comics, we can actually use our power for good. We actually have a chance to make a greener grid for everybody through the actions of corporate buyers who can drive change in the industry in ways that the rest of us probably can. So, hey, you want one more shot? You're not gonna let me just, you're not gonna let me just close beautifully like that?
No. We need a balance here. Emotional balance is great. If you need to get a bus or something, go ahead. Some people need to catch transit or something.
Thank you.
So go ahead, okay, if you need to, but I just want to see how much of an optimist you are. And so if you're a, let's say, reformed engineer, I'm a reformed scientist. What do you think about the current massive pushback against ESG in the country from the political right and the effect that that's likely to have on businesses and business decision making?
Yeah, it's terribly unfortunate.
I
Incredibly
agree.
predictable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You know, Al Gore's enthusiasm for climate change stopped climate change action for a decade.
That's provocative.
And unfortunately, didn't change anybody's minds who wasn't going to be changed anyway. Because he was shouting from one end of the spectrum and could only be heard in one place. And I think that the effort around sustainable business and ESG was heard similarly, even though it was not, when it's coming from Bloomberg and when it's coming from Wall Street, you would have thought that it was endorsed as legitimate business thinking. Unfortunately, there are folks who are willing to take anything to their political ends and make hay where they can. So I think it's a negative for the short term. Ultimately, business has seen enough good results that there is pretty good traction in the business community for embracing environmental and social responsibility as a part of the business equation. And I expect it to continue pretty strong.
Okay, you are an optimist. Well, thank you for that among everything. And thank you as well for lending us so much of your really valuable time. This is great.
Thank you all. Thanks to all the folks online if you're still there. Really, really appreciate you being here. And thanks to all of you. And thanks for your preparation and thoughtful